terrorist guy. You know. His group, the Irgun, blew up the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, killing, 81 men, women, and children. They hung British soldiers from the trees. The Irgun, with the Haganah, killed the men and boys at Deir Yassin and turned loose the women and children to start the Nakba, the Exodus. Now, these are not nice people, but Menachem Begin later won the Nobel Peace Prize because he accomplished his objective. He created a state. So you talk with a man like Hassan Nasrallah. There was just a big picture of him in the Wall Street Journal, which is not exactly a pro-Islamic newspaper. I think you could say with some safety. And Nasrallah says, and people have said on television, what kind of guy is he? I said, well, he's an intelligent, educated man who wants for his people jobs, schools, hospitals, irrigation, electricity, and who's prepared to fight for it. To get that for his people. We can think of a lot of famous people in the world who did that for their own people. George Washington, is he a terrorist? Yeah, he rose up against the other. And Nelson Mandela, these guys are terrorists in a sense. So when Menachem Begin was asked about it, he said, yes, I killed for Israel, but, and here comes the point, my cause was just. Okay? Those other guys don't have a just cause. So the people who support what's happening believe it's going to work. And belief is an important factor. That's what religions are all about. You got to believe. And if you do, then you do certain things that other people say, well, that's a crazy thing to do. I have a lot of fun when I talk to people. According to what I'm told, there are 143 Protestant sects. And if that is true, then 142 of them are wrong. You can't all be right. Another thing, I was on a call-in show once in Texas. Honest to goodness, it was the Earl and Jethro show. If you could believe that. And you had to talk Texas to get on there. Anyway, I love Texas. I was stationed there 3 times in the Army. This guy called in. It was a call-in show. He said, Ambassador Peck, can Muslims be democratic? And I said, let me answer your question with a question to set the stage. Can Christians eat meat on Friday? Well, it depends which Christians you're talking about, doesn't it? Some can, some can't. And your question indicates that you think Islam is a monolith, just one big chunk. But there's no major religion in the world that isn't divided up into groups and sections of beliefs and attitudes. The moderates, the liberals, and all the ones in between. Of course they can be democratic. Some of them. Others don't want to be. And he said, well, thank you very much. He said, I never thought about that. I love to do that. That lifts my spirits. Get somebody to think about things. By the way, don't you ever ask a man where he's from. If he's from Texas, he will already have told you. And if he's not, you don't want to embarrass him. Texas, look, we're going to have to end I have to get you out of here by 2 in the morning. Questions? Yes, sir.
Okay,
you're back again.
You work in Morocco, right?
Huh?
You work in Morocco.
I did, yes.
Okay. I was last year in Dubai and in Morocco. And the United States is supporting only kingdoms. Jordania, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, Arab United Emirates.
United Kingdom. Yeah, okay.
So is that a way to support democracy?
Well, there are democracies and democracies. One of the most famous sociologists in the world is a Dutchman named Geert Hofstede. If any of you have come across this name in your study? Geert Hofstede, spelled G-E-E-R-T-E-H-O-F-S-T-E-E-D-E. You don't know, but in 1526, there was a verbal famine in Wales, and all the vowels went to Holland to have a better life. That's why Wales has all these words with no vowels in them, and the Dutch got vowels by the two of them. Anyway. Hofstede did this study of the world with sociologists from 50 countries, and they conducted a series of tests. You not really a test, but they made a statement, and then you could indicate whether you strongly agreed, mildly agreed, that sort of thing. Well, one of the questions would be, when I'm given an assignment of work to do, I like to just be free to go and do it. At the other end, when I have an assignment, I like to be told precisely how they want it done. So people took this test in 50 countries, and then they sat down and evaluated it. and gave it a numerical number in these 5 categories of culture. And the tremendous variation between this country, in which they like to have a strong leadership, it's desired, and this country where they're willing to accept it but don't want it if they can avoid it. Malaysia at one end, you know, and China at the other, for example, even though they're close together. And if you look at that thing, you begin to see why it is that some countries have gotten along very nicely with non-democratic forms of government, and others haven't. Because in this test, there are cultures in which people from certain families expect and get respect from others because, he's a Hasuna. This is a tribal sort of approach, but it exists in a lot of countries. Or if you go to Iraq to work, you've got to recognize the names of the families that command respect because they're the Kennedys, you know, if you will, or the Bushes. No, the Kennedys. What else? Yes, sir.
Based on your personal experiences, do you feel that the United States government wants to have peace, create a peace situation between Israel and Palestinian, based on that cooperation here? Would not, because that's going to be against their profit. And
I have never seen, well, I'll take it back. I have seen very few indications that the American leaders or people in leadership positions, which is not necessarily the same thing, are willing to take the political risks required to bring about something.
I'm not talking about the risk. Do they want it at all? That's the question.
Yes. What do they want above all? What is the number one desire of every politician? To be reelected. Reelected, okay, then to be reelected. Now, if you want to be reelected, you may sometimes have to sublimate your personal beliefs in order to get reelected.
Again, I emphasize that not politicians, but corporations. Do they, because...
No, there's a very, very important segment of our society that doesn't want to see anything change. Look, how many times have you noticed that whenever a senior American official goes off to Israel, while he or she is there, they announce the building of another 400 settlements? I mean, you get the message here, Condoleezza? Look over here, Condoleezza. Have you ever heard the phrase, flipping the bird? They told you. They did this to Joe Biden, the vice president. Every time somebody goes over, they build more settlements. While you're there, there's a message, sir. There's a message to politicians. You all know where the word politics comes from? Poly, from the Latin, meaning many, and ticks meaning small blood-sucking insects. This is what you have to understand. That so, democracy is a clumsy, awful way to
what your conclusion would be? What your conclusion would be? What would you say? Would it be?
I don't think the American government has the courage to do it. No American. You may know that 96 senators said that Israel had the right to attack that ship and kill those people, including an American. No, that tells you something. So cooperation, the Israelis don't want to cooperate with the Palestinians, they want to get rid of them. And the Palestinians don't want to cooperate with the Israelis, they'd like to have some freedom. So cooperation isn't going to be the way to do it. And unless and until the occupation ends. And over the years that I've been watching, I haven't seen the smallest progress in that direction. In fact, we've watched it go the other way. So I don't think anybody is going to push that button.
I guess I mispronounced. I didn't mean cooperate. Corporation. That's what I mean. Corporations.
Cooperation.
Not cooperate. Corporation.
Cooperation.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's what I mean. I might have a heavy accent. So, but corporation picking up the government, do you feel, based on your personal experience, that I would like to know, would you think, is there any chances of that Israeli and Palestinian come to some kind of peace with each other? Because
see, corporations, I hate to say this because I'm a former business major with an MBA. Corporations are in the business of making money. Yeah? And there's a lot of money to be made if the tension tensions continue by an awful lot of people. So some corporations see that as a gold mine. They're going to buy more equipment, they're going to sell more stuff, and look at hardware, and hey, yes, sir, right? Will be. Because that's the bottom line for them. I've been watching for years, waiting for something to happen that would really give me the hope. I'm not a thinking realist, which makes me a skeptic. Something that was going to happen that was really going to change the way things are. I haven't seen it yet. Including, the assault on Lebanon twice, the assault on Gaza, plus all the other things going on, the American people, they don't care. And this is a democracy, sir.
A question I really love your approach intercultural understanding. So you're an ambassador, you speak, former ambassador, you speak 5 languages. What's the best way to learn about another culture?
The best way to learn about another culture, I guess, is to live in it. And live in it, not out of it, on the edges of it. But even me, and I was telling somebody about this, I lived in Morocco where I learned Moroccan Arabic, which isn't really terribly useful outside of it. It's a start, So I was in Tunisia, and the SS Hope came. This was a big hospital ship that a do-good agency bought from the U.S. government, and they would stock it with American and Canadian doctors and go to underdeveloped countries where the doctors could perform 12 surgeries a day for 6 weeks and then go home. Getting all kinds of, they didn't do post-op or pre-op, they just did the operation. So the ship was coming to Tunisia. And when I heard about this, I went across the street to where my friend Mohammed was working as a gardener in this nice house. And I said, oh, Mohammed, my brother, I have for thee wonderful news. And he said, and yes, and what is it? I said, there's a boat coming with doctors on board, and they can fix your son's foot. The little kid, Ahmed, had a club foot. And he looked at me and he said, God gave him that foot. It's maktub. It's written that he was going to have that foot. So, and I knew that, but I figured, okay, here's a chance to fix the kid's foot. Any American would rush out the door to do, but not there, not here, not in that situation. So understanding a culture is a really tricky thing, because if you go down south in the United States, people after you've been there a while will speak to you very heatedly about the war of northern aggression. The what? The war? Look, it happened down there, see? That's where Sherman marched to the sea. He didn't do it through New Jersey. So they have a much different view of that war than the people in the north. Just like people in the Middle East see the word crusade, and it has a totally different meaning for them than it does in Europe. And you don't have to agree with the difference, but the killing took place in the Middle East. So the Europeans set off these nice guys, and they butchered all those folks down there, and they remember that. It's been 1,000 years. But cultural things don't go away. They become part of your cultural history. And so you tend to see those things differently. Here come the Europeans again. Look, how many people in this room remember, no, how many people know that when the French were in control of Syria, they cut off a piece of it and made it a separate country called Lebanon? Well, if you know that, you can understand that the Syrians see Lebanon differently than we do. And Kuwait was part of Iraq until the British cut it off. And what scares me is that those who don't study history are condemned. I appeared on a panel discussion on the World Affairs Council in Washington, D.C. And we were talking about a book written by a man I know, The Solution for Iraq, Partition. He wanted to see a Sunnistan, a Shiistan, and a Kurdistan. And so the panelists talked, and it came my turn, and I said, well, what a fabulous idea, partition. And look at the wonderful examples we have of how well it's worked in Northern Ireland, Cyprus, Kashmir, Palestine. What a fabulous idea. Look at the wonderful effect it had all through Africa, and they cut countries up. But I have a couple of questions. Number one, Turkey has said over and over and over and over, there will never be a Kurdistan. Now, what part of that sentence don't you understand? Secondly, if you have a Shia Sunni in Kurdistan, where do the 2 million Turkmen go, the survivors? What about the Yazidis, the Christians, the Mandaeans? We know what happens when you partition a place. Bloodshed. Silence. You know, I mean, gosh, you know, what kind of idiocy? This is a very intelligent guy who writes a book and gets it published. Let's slice them all up because it worked so well, it would pass. No, it ain't. Ladies and gentlemen, really, we're just about to run out of time here. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of get your opinion, given that the occupation's been going on for over 40 years and nothing has really changed, and as you pointed out, things have just gotten way worse. As far as the fact, like, what people can kind of do to actually promote peace in the region, given that, like, APAC has so much control over Congress, what do you think about the call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions? Is it a movement that you see that has potential?
Well, you know, the boycott had an impact on South Africa, everybody said. You know, it hit them economically hard. And it probably is an effective tool. It's much, much better than sanctions, where you just indiscriminately punish the people. But if you did that, or suppose we just said we're not going to give Israel $3 billion a year every year for free. How about that? Try. Well, how about the fact that we're gonna stop, you know, vetoing UN resolutions that everybody else in the world is for? Give that a shot. But the BDS, they can't stop you from doing that. And already some major corporations have felt the impact of people boycotting Caterpillar and things like that, and companies like that who supply the Israelis with weapons of mass destruction, if you will. It could work, but it has to be fairly widespread, otherwise it's a waste of time. So one cooperative up in Oregon started it. Did you see that on the web? This cooperative in Corvallis, I think, did this. And they got picketed in nasty letters and people stopped buying there, you know, because they didn't want to stock any more Israeli goods, especially those produced in the occupied territories. But that takes a lot of people to be considered. And when the blacks were concerned about the apartheid in South Africa, there were enough of them to make a real difference, plus a lot of people who sympathized with them, and nobody was criticizing them for doing it. That's the big difference. If you go against Israel, you will be targeted one way or another for doing that, because you're automatically an anti-Semite, or worse. So this is what loads the scales against us, against you, trying to get out the word to a resistant, misinformed, and disinterested public. And they're all Americans, just like you and I. Okay, last question. Yes, sir.
I have kind of a three-part question, which you can either answer or not. The first is, what do you think of the prospects of the Israeli left and of all of the Jews who are out, who are saying the actions of Israel do not represent Judaism? They're now under investigation by the Knesset. Israel is doing everything they can to try to silence what I believe to be the majority of Jews who feel that the actions of the settlers are an absolute abrogation of their faith and they hate it and they want it to stop. Does that stand any chance? Number two, you mentioned earlier Nasrallah and Hamas and Hezbollah, and it sounded like you were kind of saying that their choice to use violence was somehow acceptable or permissible, and in light of what's happened with these peaceful democratic revolutions in Egypt, and of all the progress that's been made by the Palestinians in the last 5 years using nonviolence, do you think that modus of violent armed resistance still has a place? And the last question is, the big Israeli fear is that if they recognize Palestine, that Hamas and Hezbollah are going to continue their armed resistance, and once they give them Palestine, then they're going to want all of Israel. Do you think that Hamas and Hezbollah are going to stand by their commitments where they've said, if the occupation ends, our resistance will end? Or do you think that like any political organization, they now have a constituency on the street, and that Nasrallah and the leaders of Hamas and so on and so forth are going to want to continue that armed resistance so as to keep themselves in power?
Yes. Or no, depending on which part you're from.
Okay. I know, sorry, that was like three.
No, okay, He said, we are happy to accept support, money, and weapons from Iran. But Iran doesn't tell us what to do. And any American should understand that, because does Israel do what you tell them to do? I mean, you know, hey, happy to take the stuff. We'll be. Get it from wherever we can. And we have our projects, and Iran is not part of it. But we have facilitated Iran's involvement in all of this because everybody else is upset with us. You may remember, if you don't, a man who was the ambassador to Iraq for some years named Brian Crocker, who's just been named the new ambassador to Afghanistan, worked for me in Baghdad, and it was identifiable then as an up-and-comer. And he was authorized in 2008 to meet with the Iranian ambassador in Baghdad. I'm sure it wasn't a sort of thing. But the very next day, the Washington Post carried this headline, gentlemen, ladies, think of the meaning of this. U.S. accuses Iran of meddling in Iraq. What the hell do you call what we're doing in Iraq? And they're right next door. Do they have any reason to be concerned? So the minute they get security from Israel, Hezbollah has no reason any longer to be hostile, especially because that's a tough customer there. And Hamas doesn't have any reason either to do anything that say, look what we've accomplished. We have a country. We have a country. Oh, by the way, I mentioned this to you because most Americans are totally unaware of the fact that in Arabic, the word Palestine is Philistine. So when you talk to pro-Israeli people, they say there never was a Palestine. Well, you're right, but there was a Philistine, and they were there before the Israel. And the Philistinians are the guys that we are called Palestinians because when the Greeks got there and they gave us our language, they couldn't say ph. They said puh, Palestine, not Philistine.
Really?
Hey, those of you who speak languages, making some of these funny noises. Let me end on this note. My youngest daughter just married this really super guy from Germany. He loves this Berlitz ad. Have you seen it? Where the young man in a shirt and tie is sitting in front of this bank of radios. He's got a microphone. He says, "You have reached the German Coast Guard." And the voice says, "We are sinking." He said, "That's nice. What are you thinking about?" Loves that. So that's what Palestine is. It's Philistine. Philistine. And they were there before the arrival of the Israel. Hey, folks, thank you very much for your attention.
Monday through Thursday, there's a flag pole event outdoors, and every night at 8 p.m. In various lecture halls throughout the campus. If you have any questions, or you have anything you want to ask, you want to grab a flyer, please come and talk to any of the members of the student union. We want to thank everyone for coming out. Thank you very much.